When we think of other life forms visiting Earth, we all think of the thousands of UFOs that have been reported, and the many people who claim to have been abducted by unidentified objects from above. But not all sightings happen from the sky. There are some interesting stories of crafts being spotted in the ocean. These are called unidentified submerged objects, and with so much of Earth being made up of water, it makes sense that if another life form has ever visited, why wouldn't they land in the ocean? After all, if they had the technology to reach Earth in the first place, then their crafts would most likely be able to do so. So, from an unidentified object in the water that was fired at by the Norwegian Navy to one of the most credible pieces of footage ever caught of an unknown craft entering the ocean in Puerto Rico, here are 5 of the greatest UFO sightings and reports ever documented. Norwegian USO. In November 1972, there were reported sightings of a possible Russian U-boat travelling at high speeds in the Sognefjord in Norway that was disappearing below the surface. This was during the height of the Cold War, so the sightings were concerning enough for the Norwegian military, along with NATO forces, to participate in a 30-plus vessel 2-week surveillance of the area. Since the Sognefjord is the deepest fjord in Norway though, being up to 4,300 feet at its deepest point, there were plenty of places for this submarine to hide. However, the Norwegian Navy were well used to tracking Russian subs and using specialist equipment to try and force them to the surface, but this was something different. It wasn't something they were used to seeing, and despite the information remaining a secret, it was clear from the start that this was not a Russian U-boat, but a USO. When they eventually located it, it surfaced and was described as a massive torpedo-shaped silent craft. The Navy desperately tried to fire at it, but it kept submerging. They even tried depth charges, but nothing was stopping it. In the end, they decided to block off the ford to force the craft into shallow water. 10 days later, the craft was seen heading towards the southern tip of the ford. Then 15 minutes later, it was spotted again by 5 police officers further down on a small island. If this was the same craft, which is presumed it was, it would have had to have been travelling at 124 miles per hour. With the technology at that time, no submarine was capable of anywhere near that speed. A couple of days later, the USO had finally been pushed into shallow water, and the Navy fired anti-submarine missiles at it. These were capable of causing a huge amount of damage, however, this craft carried on completely unscathed. It then disappeared from the Navy's radar and has never been seen again. This incident sounds very hard to believe, but although most of the information remains classified, we know it did happen. What is known, apart from everything I just said, is that during the 2-week surveillance and tracking of this USO, there were several reports of aircrafts experiencing malfunctions with their electronic equipment while flying over the fords. Whatever was in that water in 1972 was not something the Norwegian Navy had come across before, and judging by their reaction, they recognised that this was not just a Russian sub, but something that even to this day is unexplained. Lake Baikal. Situated in southeast Siberia, Lake Baikal is the oldest and deepest lake in the world. It's an estimated 25 million years old and at places is 1,700 meters deep. It's also known to be very mysterious and over the years has been the site of numerous UFO and alien sightings. Take this image from NASA for example, that many believe shows an alien craft under the ice. But the most bizarre of all these reports came in 1982 during a Russian military training dive, when the divers encountered huge human-like underwater creatures swimming in the lake. They were around 3 meters long and were wearing tightly fitted silver suits. They did not appear to have any kind of diving equipment despite being 50 meters deep, but were however wearing helmets that completely covered their heads. Then something even stranger took place when the military commander decided to send 7 divers in to capture one of these things. They dived deep and attempted to capture one of the creatures with a net, but as they did, a powerful force catapulted all 7 of them to the surface. Surfacing like this from such a depth has devastating effects on the human body, and they all suffered from decompression sickness and needed immediate transfer to a decompression chamber. However, there was only one working chamber in the region, and that could only hold 2 men at a time. In desperation, they put 4 of the divers in together in an attempt to save their lives, but this apparently resulted in the death of 3 of them, and the others ended up with life-changing disabilities. The military decided to abandon any further attempts at capturing the unidentified submerged objects, and the whole event remained classified until very recently. I know this sounds hard to believe, and there are some conflicting reports on whether it's true or not, but since the military have not, and probably never will release any hard information, only we can decide what we believe. When we think of UFO reports, most of us think of the last few decades, but sightings go back hundreds of years, and that includes USOs. One of the most documented old-school USO sightings is that of the crew on board the Santa Maria and Pinta on October the 11th, 1492. It was first spotted by Christopher Columbus at around 10 PM in the Bahamas, who woke the others, who also confirmed what he was seeing. He wrote exactly what he saw in his journal, but the truth is that Columbus's original journal is long lost. Now, there are several interpretations of it with different accounts of what he saw, and they all do follow a similar theme. It's clear that Columbus and his crew saw something, and it was almost definitely a light of some description that moved up and down, reappearing and disappearing into the sea several times during the night. Columbus was apparently convinced that it was a sign that land was close, and the light was from natives living on the island, although others on board disagreed. Columbus was right though, they were close to land. About 4 hours after the first sighting, the crew reached the empty island of Guanani in the Bahamas, the first land he sighted on his discovery of the New World, leading some to think that it was alien life checking out the island before he did. Others think it could have just been shooting stars or bioluminescent fish. What makes this sighting so interesting is that it was so long ago, 1492. I doubt it would have even crossed the crew's mind that it could have been a craft from another dimension. After all, the technology for aircrafts or even lights as we know them was not even thought of at that time. So could this have been an early sighting of a USO that was bobbing in and out of the water near that island? I guess we'll never know for sure, but it's certainly an interesting historical story. Shag Harbour. This next incident was reported on October the 4th, 1967, when a large unknown object entered the water at Shag Harbour in Nova Scotia, Canada. Eyewitnesses claim that it was around 60 feet long and had been hovering around with flashing orange lights. It then tilted at a 45-degree angle and entered the water. There was around 11 witnesses who can verify the incident. One of the first was a local resident called Laurie Wickens, who was driving along the nearby Highway 3 with a group of friends. Initially they thought it was a large aeroplane, but after stopping and taking a better look, they realised it wasn't. The object had a yellow light shining from the top, and a loud whistling noise was heard, along with other loud bangs and strange noises as it entered the water. Other witnesses confirmed the same sightings, and the Canadian Coast Guard went to investigate. But by the time they reached the area, all that was left was a yellow foam on the water. No debris, body, or survivors were ever located. It was as if the craft just disappeared into the water. The next day it was confirmed that no private, commercial, or military aircraft was missing, and a team of divers were assembled who searched the harbour for 3 days, but there was no trace of anything, so the search was called off. However, it's long been speculated that there was a second, far bigger search conducted involving US and Canadian ships that carried on for much longer. This thought was strengthened when one of the military divers involved in the search spoke anonymously in an interview, and claimed that after entering the water in the harbour, the object travelled underwater up the coast, stopping near Shelburne, where it was joined by another unidentified craft. He also claims that the objects were not from planet Earth. So what happened next? Well, it seems attempts to recover the craft were finally abandoned when a Russian U-boat was spotted entering Allied waters in the north, and operations were diverted to this. By this time, the unknown crafts had apparently departed and were seen in the sky on October the 11th. There are no official documents of this second recovery effort, prompting the belief that some kind of cover-up was going on. One thing is for sure, this incident did happen, as it's filed in the Canadian government's documents as an unidentified flying object, but where they came from and where they went is a mystery. Homeland security footage. This USO sighting actually comes with some interesting footage, making it the most convincing in this video. It was recorded in April 2013 at the Rafael Hernandez Airport in Puerto Rico, and was tracked by a thermal imaging camera on board a turboprop DHC-8 aircraft by crew from US Customs and Border Control. The unidentified object appears to be travelling at great speed over land before plunging into the ocean and then re-emerging. By the end of the footage, the object appears to have either split in two or been joined by another craft. Sounds hard to believe, but take a look. It's thought the footage is genuine, and it's claimed that shortly after takeoff, the crew of the DHC-8 noticed a reddish light out in the ocean. They became concerned as the control tower had not informed them of any incoming traffic, and after radioing the tower, they told them they had visuals on the object but did not know what it was. As it approached the DHC-8, its lights turned off, although it was still being tracked by the plane's thermal imaging equipment and the tower's radar. The object was said to be between 3 and 5 foot long and was averaging around 80 miles per hour. It travelled through the water for around half a mile before flying back out, and after flying around for a short while, it headed back over the ocean before finally submerging and disappearing. The official report on this incident is that the object could not be identified and displayed characteristics that cannot be explained. This, along with the amount of time that Homeland Security put into investigating this case, has led researchers to believe alien technology was responsible. As always, there are theories on what it could be, but most of these have been ruled out for various reasons. So there really is no explanation. This truly is an unidentified flying object, as well as being an unidentified submerged object caught on camera, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. So that's 5 incredible USO sightings. I hope you've enjoyed, and if you didn't already know, I've been running a second YouTube channel for a few months now, and we've built up a good collection of my videos that are narrated in Spanish. So if you enjoy my videos and it would be easier and more enjoyable for you to listen in your native language, then go check out the channel. Thanks for watching, have a great day or night, and I'll see you next week for another video.